this is where Ray Price finished his final play of his non-immortal career.
I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and does being an immortal really matter? The actual concept was invented by Rugby League Week as a marketing ploy in 1981, and was really just a formalised pub talk. The only actual requirement to becoming an immortal was that the 3 judges had actually seen you play, so everything before pre-war was out. But the actual concept was there was no rules. It was just whoever they liked and whoever they thought were basically the greatest of all time.
The award is now owned by the NRL, and it's a formal accolade. So why are so many greats of the game still being overlooked? By the end of this video, you're going to understand why players have been overlooked in the past, and why I think these 4 players should be made immortals immediately. If you look at the current list of immortals, there are only 4 of them that actually played together, and they were mostly in the 1950s and 1960s in those great St George sides. Outside of that, 2 of them played together at rep level, and the rest, well, they never really crossed paths. They were playing in different sides in different eras. We now have immortals whose playing careers span from 1908 all the way through to 2007. So perhaps that's the reason that players in star-studded sides don't get the individual recognition they probably deserve. When you're in a team of greats, it's hard to stand out on your own. And I'm going to get to those players in a minute. But first, there seems to be one more reason why those players aren't being chosen. There is no rhyme or reason or even timeline as to when players get selected. Even the eligibility in terms of what they actually did in the game is up in the air. There's the very vague, they must have done something during their careers or played in a way that changed the game, which is very much open to interpretation. Eligibility has been tightened somewhat since 2018 when the NRL took charge of the awards, so it means that players have to have been retired for at least 5 years before they become eligible. There are some voting requirements and processes that are required to be inducted, but it's nothing like the NFL's Hall of Fame. And unlike the NFL, the Immortals can't be nominated by fans. The NRL seems to be making the Immortals up on the fly, without a more robust process or even timeline of when players get inducted. I mean, every year the NFL inducts more players into their Hall of Fame, and it's set out very structured. You know it's going to occur the week before the Super Bowl. For the NRL, and a sport that has existed for over 100 years in New South Wales, they're going to be playing catch-up for a very long time. So what about those missing immortals? If we go back to the 1980s, there's really one side that stands out throughout that decade, and that's Parramatta. Across a 6-year period, they made 5 grand finals, winning 4 of them. Not even a Melbourne Storm that were more than $1 million over the salary cap managed that. And as I've mentioned before, the man at the top of that list is Ray Price. Now, Price played 11 seasons for Parramatta throughout the 70s and 80s, and he had a 69% winning percentage, which is insane. His former teammate and halfback Peter Sterling said that without Ray, Parramatta would not have had the success that they did, and they definitely would not have had that dynasty they did in the 80s. If you cast your mind back to the start of this video, you'll remember that I told you Ray Price finished his career making a tackle in the 80th minute of the 1986 Grand Final. And that's exactly what he was about, playing every play, every tackle to the last minute, until the last second, until the referee finally blew his whistle. And it goes without saying that Ray was more than just a workhorse. He was a winner, and he practically won everything available to him in his career. Rothmans medals, Dally M medals, premierships, origins, test series. If Ray competed in it, he won it. And he did all of that after coming across from rugby union, after he'd already established himself as a nailed-on wallaby. And as I mentioned there, Peter Sterling was his great teammate, and the legendary halfback the Eels have been chasing ever since he retired in 1992. And by the time he actually retired due to his shoulder injury, he was one of the most decorated players the game had ever seen. So just what did his trophy cabinet look like? Well, he had 4 premierships, 4 Dally M Halfback of the Year awards, 2 Dally M medals, a Clive Churchill medal, 2 Rothmans medals, and the Golden Boot. The Immortals, though, aren't just a list of achievements that a player has managed during their career. Frank Burge is on that list, and he played most of his career for Glebe, and they won nothing. He has 0 premierships to his name. Although he was one of the most prolific try scorers in the competition, made all the more special by the fact that he played in the second row or at prop. But if you want to look at Sterlo's impact, you can go beyond Parramatta to what he did at Origin and at Test level. In terms of Origin, in 1986, the Blues won 3-0, and Sterlo was the halfback. He was the first halfback from either Queensland or New South Wales to lead a 3-0 whitewash. He was also the halfback in 1982 and 1986 Kangaroos tours to Great Britain, meaning he was an invincible 2 times over. That's right, an invincible, but not yet an immortal. And of course, whenever Peter Sterling is mentioned, his great mate, 5'8" and halves partner Brett Kenny is part of that package. He was of course the natural, a man who seemed like he fell off some kind of assembly line of footballing talent. He was fast, he was evasive with incredible ball skill, made all the more amazing by the fact that he was doing that all with a leather ball throughout his career. Like Sterlo, he won just about everything, and he's also got the record for scoring a double in 3 consecutive grand finals. But the thing that I think really makes him an immortal is the fact that he's the only New South Wales 5'8" to hold a winning record against Wally Lewis at origin level. So he's good enough to beat an immortal, but he's not good enough to be an immortal. And now we're on to the champion of Parramatta. It's the Crow himself, the last player to be selected to represent the Kangaroos from Country Rugby League. That's right, he was so good that he didn't need to play in the Sydney competition to be wearing the green and gold. Cronin was known as a prolific point scorer. In 1985, he broke Graham Eady's record for the most points in first grade, and Cronin did it in 9 seasons compared to Eady's 12. Not only that, but Cronin's 1985 breaking of the record stood until the year 2000 when Daryl Halligan broke it. And Halligan was a more prolific point scorer than Cronin, don't get me wrong, but he was able to kick most of his career with a synthetic ball and was able to use a kicking tee. Cronin was still kicking the old toe punt method using a steel-capped boot, a leather ball and a mound of sand wet by some water. Cronin alongside Ray Price ended their careers together going out as heroes in the 1986 Grand Final, and both had big impacts on the match. Ray Price with his tireless defensive efforts, and Cronin scored all 4 of Parramatta's points in that famous tryless Grand Final. There should be immortal colleagues in Sterling and Kenny played on into the 1990s. Sterling retired in 92 and Kenny in 93 to bring the curtain down well and truly on that golden era. The 4 of them had a lasting impact on the game through either their records or the way they played the sport. But none of them are on the immortal list, and they should be. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, Ray Price managed to come across from rugby union and dominate rugby league. So if you want to see which other players made the switch between league and union, you can click right here and see some of the ones that actually regretted it.